What's up, everybody? This is Josh Lyles, founder over at Sales-CRM. Today, I'm joined by my friend Michael Sternberg over at 3PL Systems. He's the director of sales over there. He's been one of my friends in the industry for 2-ish years now, I want to say, somewhere around
years
that.
At least.
Yeah. So I'm excited for this one. Michael is, I would say, like one of my somebody that I clicked with in the industry a little bit earlier on, like when Sales Dash made the transition to focus in the logistics and freight space specifically. I went to Orlando to the TIA conference. You may not even like fully know about this, but didn't know anybody really when I was going there. I think I knew like one or two people, and was just one of the easiest guys to talk to at the whole conference, and has been a friend since then. So yeah, but outside of even just being a good dude, he oversees sales for, I would say, a pretty well known, and I would say a TMS company that's been in the space for quite some time now, from industry veterans. And I will say, from, just always checking out content, having conversations at conferences, a pretty smart, sharp salesperson. So we're going to talk sales. We're going to talk TMS in this one. And he's got a great voice for podcasting. He's got a great voice for podcasting. So I'm excited. Michael, welcome, man. Good to see you.
Thanks, man. That was very kind. I like the way you talk about me. That feels good. Not that I need my head to be any bigger than it already is. But it's funny. I do remember meeting you at the conference, and I remember very vividly. Actually, you came up to the booth. You were like, "Look, I don't really know much about the space, but here's what I'm doing." And the one thing that I really remember, you were like, "Man, 3PL Systems. That's a really good domain and a really good name." And you were just like, because you were like that early in your sales dash journey, right? You were still like, do I change names? What domain do I get? What do I do? But there's a certain amount of like brand equity that comes with something as simple as having a good name, having a good URL, right? It sounds kind of silly, but I do think there's a lot of value there inherently.
No, it's true. And it's just like, yeah, man, if you're a 3PL and you need systems, it's, man, it makes a lot of sense.
Systems.
Yeah, exactly. So on point. Well, really quick, Mike, tell us who you are, what you do.
Yeah, so I have been here at 3PL Systems selling TMS to freight brokers for, it'll be 9 years in September, so almost a decade. Got a sales background just in general. I mean, I cut my teeth knocking doors residentially, getting sponsorships for children in third world countries for 90 cents a day. That's how I learned to sell. And then I sold business to business, door to door for copiers right after that. So I have a sales background, know how to cold call, know how to do all those things. But yeah, I came over to the TMS world. I didn't know what a freight broker was. I didn't know what a TMS was. Obviously, that's changed quite a bit. You know, I've done a lot to be a student of the game, as I like to say. And I think more importantly than anything, I like to position myself as someone who understands my clients' businesses and my prospects' businesses just as well, if not better, than I understand the product that I'm selling, right? And so that's something that has been really big for me, and I think is a differentiator for a lot of salespeople that are at the top of their craft, is that when you're having these conversations with your prospects and your clients, you're having a business conversation and you're not having a sales conversation, and they feel that, and it kind of sets the stage in a way where you become like a trusted advisor more than a sales guy. But anyways, yeah, so been here for 10 years-ish. It'll be 9 in September, like I said. Boring stuff outside of work. I mean, I'm married. I got 2 kids, a 9-year-old daughter, 5-year-old or 6-year-old son.
Love it.
But yeah, man, I'm one of those sales guys through and through, you know?
How were the door-to-door sales days selling copiers?
Oh, dude. It sucked. Like it's terrible.
Are you glad you went through that at an earlier part of your career? And do you feel 100%. Like it actually helped you get to the point to, have the success that you're having now?
Oh, there's no question. There's something about, like, when I was doing the sponsorship stuff, like it was all charity work, basically. Like, charities would hire us on to go residential door to door. I mean, we'd knock 250, 300 doors in a day. And, you'd be lucky to get 1 or 2 people to sign up. So like that amount of rejection is something that can't be replaced anywhere. That amount of like, hey, I'm going to knock on your door. Number one, you're at home. You probably just got off work. So you're like not wanting to talk to me. Yeah. Not only that, like, I'm going to sell you something that isn't actually something. I'm just selling a feeling because it's a charitable donation. And you're going to give me your credit card at the door. and you're going to sign up for a recurring 12-month agreement, right? Like that's incredibly difficult to do. And there's all the normal sales stuff you learn of, body language, tone of voice, inflections, how to, pull. It's not easy, right? And so, yeah, there were a lot of learnings from that situation that I wouldn't trade for anything. I actually got into copiers from doing that. I knocked on a dude's door at about 8:15 in the evening. It's about 100 and something degrees that day. I'd been pitching doors for like 8 hours and I was dripping sweat. Dude answers the door, no shirt on, board shorts and sandals. And he's like, "Hey, bro, what are you doing out here?" And I'm like, "Oh, God, Anyways, he worked for the copier company. And he's like, "Listen, here's the deal. Come work for me. You're going to get paid more and whatever." So I did that. And then, yeah, it's the same. But then I got like more introduction to the business world. So I was calling on business owners instead of people at their homes. But selling copiers is like, that was what, 2016? Like, even then, people don't use copiers as much as they do now, right? And it was just something like, what am I doing walking around selling copiers right now?
Yeah.
And tough. So, yeah, I wanted to get into tech. But then I can knock a lot more doors with a phone or email than I ever could physically walking business to business or door to door doing that, right? So, but it's all building blocks, right?
Yeah. And they all have some kind, like, I would say knocking on somebody's door or going to do an on-site visit cold is very similar to a cold call. It's not 100%. It's not going to be guaranteed to go well. It obviously really depends on what you're selling and what the context is and that stuff. But there are certain things, even with cold emailing, like it all kind of connects very similarly, right? Because you're a total stranger, never engaged with them before, talked with them before, and then yeah, I feel like there's great things to learn. But I like following and learning from even the door-to-door salespeople online and sort of watching some of that stuff because that takes some guts.
Dude, the objection handling is like completely next level. Because again, like I'm not going to revisit this door, right? Like I'm here. I have 1 minute for you to give me your credit card or not, right? Like that's a crazy thing. So it gives you tough skin, which anybody who's been in sales long enough knows that that's a requirement, what you need. Right? Yeah,
for sure. What? Not to go like too deep into it, but how long? How long did it take you to grasp what a freight broker is? You obviously came into it from doing stuff totally different,
Yeah.
And freight brokering was a very unique concept for me coming from Tesla. I had no idea what it was. Didn't know that they were a thing, and then it was kind of cool once I got to actually learn about it and then got into it. But for you, going to sell tech, which it sounds like that was new at that point for you, and then also to an industry that was a little bit foreign to you. What was that like?
It was difficult, for sure. On the surface, it seems simple, right? Like, oh, the freight broker's the middleman between a guy that has a truck and a guy that has freight. Like, sure, I get it. I was lucky at the time when I was hired. Our CEO and founder, he's now a silent partner. He also owned a brokerage. So I sat on a brokerage floor for a week. My first week at 3PL, I wasn't even at 3PL. I was sitting on a brokerage floor, just shadowing, listening, and learning. And, that helped. But it's also like anything, like, even though I'm learning, it's like I can maybe regurgitate certain things and like tell you certain things. But I remember my first demo that I did myself at 3PL. I was great until someone asked me a question. And if you asked me a question and you threw me off my track and I didn't have a plan on what to say, I was screwed, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't like feeling that way. And so, dedicating myself to learning the space. And I would say it took to be like proficient in kind of talk the talk, because there's certain language you need to use. And there's, all this, probably a good 6 to 12 months.
Sounds right.
Yeah. And I would say, one of like kind of like a win for me and like a personal success was when I had a client or a prospect asking me like, okay, so like, how long were you brokering for? And I'm like, nice. Not that I tricked them, but like, okay, I actually I can fit in. You think I know what I'm talking about? Not because that's not true, but because I do, right? And so that was a good kind of like validating of, okay, I understand the space, I know what I'm doing. But I would argue that's probably the hardest part about any new sales role, right? Is really getting to the point where you understand the business. Because if not, like I said earlier, like they just look at you like a sales guy. And they're like, okay. We hear it all the time from clients, right? And they're like, well, are you guys just a bunch of tech guys over there? Has anyone ever brokered freight? Like,
That's what I
to a
love about
degree,
freight. That's what I
sure.
love about freight brokers, though. You know, freight brokers will shoot you so straight. And how many of
Oh,
them on
dude.
LinkedIn are always just talking about, oh, I can't stand these freight tech guys that have never sat in the seat, don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know, so it's funny, man. But they just, yeah, they're relentless. They don't hold back on all that stuff. And I'm surprised. I'm not surprised by that, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate it though. And I get it. Like, if I'm a freight broker, why do I want to explain what I'm doing for 15 minutes to then get a 5-minute demo? If
Yeah,
you already know you save me that 15 minutes and you just give me the 5, I mean, it totally makes sense from their seat as well.
yeah. And I also think too, just kind of in that natural progression of yourself and this, you talked about it. You know, staying with your script. That's where it feels very salesy, I think, for
Oh,
the
yeah.
buyer, right, and the person on the other side. But when you're trying to get to that trusted advisor space that you were talking about earlier, you do that by being able to just allow them to ask questions and you guide them based on where those questions are, right? Use cases or um, product demo, whatever it may be, just based on actual questions that they have of what they want to get to. Because we've had it with brokers before. They're like, I'm going to cut to the chase. I want to see these 3-4 things, get to it, right? And I'm sure you probably had some of the same, but that's just
Sure.
kind of how it can go sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because we were talking about Anthony before we started, other sales guy that works over here. And, it's like, okay, when you're new, I got to give you a list of questions. If you're doing a discovery call, I need you to get these 5 questions answered.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't know how to deliver it and you're not experienced in it, then like you sound like you're reading off of a list of questions because you are. And, he would sit in on me doing discovery calls early on. He'd be like, well, why does it sound like a conversation? And why does it not sound like you're reading off a list of questions? I said, well, because I'm not. But also, if you look at it, I still got the same questions answered in a conversational way,
Yeah,
right? But if you don't know how to do that, you can't train that, in my opinion, right? Like that's more of just like an experience thing and knowing how these things go. And okay, how many loads a month do you do, for example, or how many contacts are you managing in your CRM? For you, it's like you know how to weave that into the conversation in a way that's natural because you've had so many of those conversations, right?
correct. Yeah. I mean, it's endless. And eventually there's just so many different directions that you can take it. And I think the benefit of not being on script is just like you want to be able to know like which, if you're trying to stay within a specific flow, it's just not going to work for most of your demos, right? You can say sure it
Mm-hmm.
might work for a lot of them, but I will say even with brokers, I would say like the end goal for them, if you're talking about a CRM, is get new customers or expand load count, with their existing ones. It's like one of those two things. They're all trying to work towards that same way, but the way that they get there is always a little bit different. Like some love calls,
Mm-hmm.
some love emails, some love on-site visits, some love pipeline management, some don't give a damn about it. So knowing like which direction you can go and being able to be fluid with that, I think is pretty key.
You just got to know your shit, though, right? Like
Takes
that's
time.
really
You
that's
got you
really
got
it.
you got to put in the reps and do all that.
100%.
So transitioning to 3PL systems and talking about that a little bit. Tell us a little bit more about like the typical brokerages that you work with. What does the makeup look like for them?
Yeah, so we have a pretty interesting blend of clients. We have clients that are like less than $5 million a year in freight under management, and we have clients that are hundreds of millions of dollars a year in freight under management, and everything in between. If you were to look at like God, I'm blanking on the word. If you were to look at how that like kind of spreads out, it's probably indicative of what the market is. So like most of our clients are going to be somewhere in the range of like 15 to 75 million. But I think that's just because those are the types of people that are buying commercially available TMSs, right? You're going to have the smaller people, which are going to go on the call them more affordable TMSs.
Sure. Yeah.
I wouldn't call them cheaper, but they have there's a time and a place for those, and they do a good job.
Of
And
course.
maybe $100 a month for a couple users gets you to where you need to be for the size of your business, and all good. We're not typically the best fit for those kinds of customers. And then also, what we typically see is if you're over $100 million a year in freight spend, you start thinking about building your own software, right? So there's a lot of proprietary solutions out there. And there's an argument and a conversation to be had around like a hybrid type of model. Do you like buy the core and then build on top of it and kind of get the best of both worlds, which we kind of go down that rabbit hole as well with the larger types of clients. But it's a pretty widespread. But again, I would say the bulk are probably that 25 to like 80 million ish is probably two-thirds of the business is probably in that fat of the bell curve.
Gotcha. So in the sea of TMSs that are out there, I'm curious about this, and let's just say like within that range, maybe 25 to 80. Like, what would you say somebody that's actually shopping for one, like what would be the three of the top considerations that they should be considering when buying a TMS?
What should they be looking at, or what do they look at? They're
So
two
I
different
want to
questions.
I want to follow up on that after, but I want to know like what you think they should actually be considering first.
Sure. I think one of the most important things, and most people do this, but I think a lot of people may not realize how important it is with your current tech stack, because TMS is obviously the cornerstone that everything plugs into. There's all these complementary products. And I know you guys did you guys release your first integration with the TMS? I know you were working on it.
So we have a piece of it that we push live, but we
Nice.
haven't like been marketing it because
Yeah.
we're taking it to a deeper level, which will be pretty soon here.
Cool. Yeah. But as you know, being what I'll call a complementary product, meaning like you ideally are going to plug into a TMS. All of these
Correct.
tracking tools and load boards, and even like the compliance and onboarding tools like the highways or the green screens for rate intelligence, they all plug into the TMS, right? So I think that's, kind of a baseline is, okay, what am I currently using that's integrated into my systems? And do you guys have that integration built, right? So all of the main players have the integrations with the same people, right? None of it is like proprietary, but some of us are integrating with more newer technologies. And so there may be like the Happy Robots and the Vumas and the Levities and the Fleetworks of the world, these newer AI voice tools. Not everybody's integrated with them. And if you're either one, using them, or two, looking at using them, is my new TMS going to be interested in integrating with them, or even be able to integrate with them? So I think zooming out and looking at the whole ecosystem is a really important piece. Most people do that. The second piece that I think people really need to look at is literal, just like how many clicks does it take to get the job done? Like, not that you need to go through and actually count, but if you're a bigger organization, maybe it's an extra 2 clicks a load, but over, call it 5,000 loads a month, 10,000 loads a month, that adds up. And across all your reps, that adds up. And those little efficiency gains, I think, are a big thing to look at. And then the last piece that I really think people should consider, how the hell are we going to implement this? And people miss this one a lot, because you don't just buy a tool like a TMS and give it to your people and say, go. It doesn't work, right? Yeah. Some people think that. The reality is you need to have a plan internally for how to roll it out, how you're going to deal with the pushback, because people hate change. And you're going to have people say, I've been doing it this way for 20 years. Why are you making me do it differently? And you need to be able to handle that and articulate that and make it easy on them to do that. And so I think that change management piece is really something people should be looking at. How easy is it going to be to implement this? How hard is it going to be to train and learn on this? One of the things we tout all the time is the system's pretty easy to use, and it's deceptively easy, meaning like you don't realize how powerful it is because it's so easy to use. Whereas a lot of like legacy tools, let's just say like the Salesforces of the world, right? Sure, the tool can do everything, but it takes me freaking 12 months to learn how to do it. Mm-hmm. And it takes $100,000 a year Salesforce admin to set everything up, right? And I know you know these things because you sell in that space, right?
For
but
sure.
It's the same kind of thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I know integrations is definitely a big one. And then I feel like for the implementation piece, that it has to be big, because especially for, I will say, at least on Sales Dash's side, I've been kind of shocked sometimes with the amount of times we've sort of heard that people are transitioning TMSs. Like, I didn't think it would be as frequent as what I've sort of heard, but it sounds a little bit more frequent. Maybe it's just because it's easier to migrate data, now from system to system. And like, you probably have to be, if you really want to play in the space today, to be able to export, import data out and migrate it. But that's been interesting. But I feel like from the seat of a freight broker, when you have done the repetition of something thousands and thousands of times again, and having to take them away from that and into another system. And they are such big little things people, of just like removing one click and that stuff. I can only imagine the challenge with that, because I've seen it, from office visits and stuff when people did just recently move a TMS and hearing either positive or negative feedback. But I've always found that really interesting, especially on the TMS side, because I'll watch the demos when I go to the conferences and then obviously see it in real time. And like, yeah, some of them can be, I would imagine, takes months to really figure it out.
Sure. Even if it doesn't, right? Even if it's easy to learn, it's different, right?
Correct.
And
different. Yeah.
and I don't do it this way. What do you mean I have to do it this way now? Well, this is how I used to do it. And if I'm so far removed from like the people making the decision because I'm, day to day, just like covering freight or tracking freight or whatever I'm doing, I don't know what the other bigger, greater reasons are that drove this decision. I just know that you made my job harder because now I have to learn a whole new process. And so if I don't understand from an org level, if it's not shared, the messaging on why we're doing this and what the future looks like, then I'm going to push back because I don't see any reason that you're making me do this, right?
No, understood. What's the overrated feature for TMS systems that people are shopping for, think that they need, that they have to have for their brokerage, that you think they don't need?
The overrated TMS feature. That is a funny question. I need to choose my words wisely here.
Or all right, maybe I'll even reposition the question, because I don't want to get you in trouble. I don't want to get you in trouble here.
Yeah.
I feel like, at least from being on the tech side now for a while, and let's just say selling the CRMs and stuff, there will be common things that people will come to you and say, we feel that we need this, or this is what's required, or we really want this, but they don't maybe use it. Is there anything that maybe fits that bucket in the TMS? I'm assuming there's got to be some stuff where they're putting it up on a higher list within their buying criteria.
Yeah.
And then in turn,
I mean, there's a lot. There's so many things because TMS is so big, right? It touches so many different departments. I think it's not so much a single thing, as much as a lot of people are wondering, well, why can't you guys do what this partner does? So for example, let's say someone is using Sales Dash and they're using a different TMS, and they come to us and they say, well, do you have a CRM built in? We say, no, you guys are already using Sales Dash. Like, we're not a CRM company, we're a TMS provider. But Sales Dash is a kick-ass job. I know Josh, it's a good tool, he's a good guy, he's going to take care of you. Why don't we just integrate the two, and it's a lot easier. And they're like, well, why can't you build it yourself? And I think this happens with a lot of things. And like, we'll use the whole like AI voice and like email parsing and OCR stuff. Like, take like the TriumphPay audit, used to be HubTran. They do a great job with like taking in invoices and scanning the data on the documents and matching them to invoices for auditing and all that. And there's a lot of other companies popping up doing that. Upwell, Navix, ePay Manager. But a lot of people are like, well, why can't you just do it? You, the TMS provider. And like, we can, sure. But what happens is when you try to be all things to everyone, you end up not doing anything really well. You just do a bunch of things kind of well, right? And I think that is a big mistake that a lot of people run into. And I think it's getting better. People are kind of realizing, okay, specialization exists for a reason. And I have a guy for pricing, and I have a guy for tracking, and I have, and if you look at the ecosystem of integration as really what's important, and how do they all live together? But I hear it all the time. Well, so-and-so company does that, and we don't have to pay for it because they do it natively. Well, if it was good enough, you wouldn't be talking to me. Let's just call it what it is, right? And so I think that's a big mistake, is really just people think the TMS should do everything. I just don't think it's realistic, and I don't think it's possible to deliver all the things on a high level if you spread yourself too thin.
I align with that, because I mean, that comes up with us every so often, where somebody will say, oh, well, we're looking at this one TMS that has a CRM built into it, so we want the all-in-one system. Like, I personally think the whole all-in-one system thing is kind of one of the overrated parts of tech at this point. It sounds great, but when you really get down to it and you look at some of the functionality and integrations or whatever it may be, it's marketed that way, that these things are out there. And do they really do them at a good deep level? No. And in my opinion, to your point, like, just go build a CRM, like, building a CRM, building a TMS, like it's not the easiest thing in the world to
It's
do,
not
man.
easy,
It's not
dude.
easy at all. So it's just, yeah, I don't know. When I hear that stuff, it's kind of funny, but I can understand it because like unless you just like if you don't really understand tech that to that level, then you would
Mm-hmm.
think, okay, cool, why is this just not possible? And can understand that,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm aligned with you on the specialization. I think certain companies do certain things really well. I even honestly sort of related to freight brokers. Like if you're a freight broker that moves all kind of equipments and modes and all this kind of stuff, like you can get outdone, in my opinion, by somebody that's very specialized in like one specific thing. And there's a lot of shippers that will also give you that feedback. Like when you've been a broker and you sat in the seat, there have been shippers that will ask you and, want to know specifically, like, well, what are you really good at? Like, I don't want to hear that you
Mm-hmm.
can just do everything. I want to know like what specifically it is. Is it a region? Is it a territory? Is it an equipment type? So I think that stuff does ring home for a lot of people, but you have to get into the nitty gritty of it. And the integrations piece is one of the things. I won't get on a tangent about it, but I think when you see people say like, oh, we've got an integration with this or that, actually understanding what that is and what that means is really important because it sounds good from the surface, but until you've actually got into it, does the integration actually transform anything in your day to day? So
Well, and integration is a broad term,
very broad.
right? So let's say with you guys, for example, we're not integrated yet, right?
Soon.
I say yet because we will be,
Yep.
right? But let's say, for example, I say we're integrated, but really all it is you guys, when there's a customer added in Salesforce, that an opportunity, or in Sales Dash that converts to a close, that inserts a customer into our TMS. I'm just using this as an example. Well, we are integrated. But if the customer expects like, well, no, I need my follow-ups to pop up inside of the TMS so that I know how to follow up with my client. I need data to populate for all of my last communications and all of my notes. Like, well, we're not integrated that way, but we're still integrated. And so to your point, what does integration mean is a big question that people don't ask, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just happened recently with like I won't name names, but like a current provider that we're integrated with released a new feature and a new endpoint that didn't exist when we first integrated. And the question came from a current client, well, why aren't you guys integrated with it? Well, number one, it just got released like 2 weeks ago, right? This is the first we're hearing about it. But from the other side, the integration partner, they told me, yeah, we're integrated with 3PL systems. They're not wrong. No one's wrong,
Correct.
but no one's clarifying, right?
What that integration, correct. The depth of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the fact that, yes, other companies do add new features and stuff. And eventually then you have to deepen the integration on that
Yes.
aspect. So I want to ask a question on the smaller brokerage side and then one on the larger brokerage side. So
Sure.
on the smaller brokerage side, you kind of mentioned earlier, hey, the transition of sure, like there's the smaller TMSs for handful of users, few users at 100 a month and whatever. But there is going to become a point in time where it makes sense to like look at the next step up. When like what would be some of the pain points or the signals for them of like when it is time for them to actually look at upgrading their system from, the tough scrappy days of all the spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Is it integrations or is it other things that typically would be a little bit more helpful for them?
It's typically almost always partially integrations, almost always, because the more cost-effective systems aren't investing that much money in integrations, nor should they, by the way. Understand it's a business decision and you're charging someone $100 a month. You can't invest a ton of money in development for a bunch of new stuff for them, and nor should you. But that is typically a piece of what happens. A lot of what we see, though, is as a company scales and they start hiring and they start bringing on people that have experienced other systems, it starts being pushed on them from new hires or from people they're interviewing as a requirement for them to compete for talent in the freight space, right? So it actually almost indirectly becomes somewhat of like a recruiting tool. I don't want to call it a recruiting tool, but you have like if I've been a broker for 20 years and you want to sign me on as an agent and I'm used to using a badass system that I've been using for 10 years and I come in and you tell me you've got I'll buy you a seat for $100 a month, system that's a glorified spreadsheet. I'm going to laugh at you, right? So we do see that inherently comes with the scale, that the quality of people that you want to attract to your organization are going to demand a higher caliber of TMS or other software within the organization. It could happen with CRMs as well, right?
Correct. Yep. Has definitely happened.
Yeah.
Going from small to large to small. I would say both ways of it. That makes sense. On the larger side, you also mentioned, hey, they're going to obviously have conversations sometimes around, well, why don't we just build something proprietary and maybe just build something ourselves, which is a reasonable thought and conversation. How often do you sort of find yourself, I guess, in the situation of somebody that is considering going with somebody like 3PL Systems or potentially actually just building their own? Because I will say from experience, I've, spoken to brokerages that did build their own and it didn't go well. Because they like building software is tough, right? And I would say, like, in their words, they've sort of said, and this is from multiple pretty decent sized companies, like the speed that they need to just like get stuff done with the tech is not fast enough internally. So that's the reason why they may go for something more off the shelf. How do you navigate those conversations for the larger brokerage on the build versus buy conversation?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Number one, most freight brokerages, even if they're big, are not equipped to be software companies. And that's not a knock on them. That's just a reality, and that's okay. It's just like saying we're not equipped to be freight brokers as an organization, right? Like, that's crazy. They tell me all the time. None of you guys know what the hell they're doing over here, right?
Let's get Cam booking some trucks.
Right. Like, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing but like coming to terms with that, I think, is an important piece. But it always comes up. Like, it's typically what we see is like around that, again, 75 to 80 million. Sometimes like 50, 60 million people start thinking about it. And we always tell them, do not build your own TMS from scratch. Trust me, you don't want to do it. Now, granted, when you're only building for one brokerage and one process and one workflow, it's a lot easier. When you're building for hundreds of brokerages like we are, it's a lot more difficult because nobody agrees on what they should do and how it should work. And, we're always navigating that. But one of the things we do that's unique, and we found a lot of success with these larger brokerages that have either done what you said, they've tried and kind of burned to the ground because it didn't work, or they're trying to make an off-the-shelf solution work, but they have too many custom needs that they can't make it work. We've figured out a way to position ourselves in this kind of hybrid model where effectively what happens is this. Let's say you come to me, you're like, hey, Mike, I'm multiple $100 million a year broker. We've been trying to build our own TMS. It's taking forever, but we're running on this legacy technology that I know isn't going to take us to the future. So what I would say to you is, have you ever considered purchasing something to build on top of, right? And so what we'll do is effectively sell you a perpetual license to our source code, right? So you don't own the IP, but you own a license to it forever and ever and ever. Like, we could go out of business, let's say, and you could still use it and do your thing. You don't own the IP. You can't spin up a company and compete against us and sell and do all those things, right? But what we've done for you in that situation is we've saved you multiple years of development time, millions of dollars in development costs, and giving you something that may give you, let's say, the foundation to building your perfect TMS, right? And so what was before a 3 to 5 year venture and multiple millions of dollars is now a third of the cost and a quarter of the time, because we expedited your process to get you 80, 90% of the way there. And then whatever that remaining 10, 20% is, you build yourself. Whatever your secret sauce is, you do it yourself. And that's been a really interesting kind of model for these larger brokerages because, again, they don't want to be software companies, nor should they be. But nothing off the shelf is going to work perfectly for them at that size. They have too many custom needs and it will never work perfectly. Mm-hmm. So being able to kind of position ourselves as like a buy and build situation and kind of layer in like a professional services element to it to help maybe with some of the customizations and guidance around architecture and building out these customizations. We've gotten a good amount of traction on that for sure.
That's interesting. Yeah. And it makes sense. I think the one thing that companies could underestimate is just the time and resources that it actually does take. And like you said, I mean, it's honestly spot on though. And I've had brokers tell me this before. They're like, look, we broker freight, man. We're not software people. We're not tech people.
Good.
So, which makes sense, right? And I do think that people have to consider that if you go to do that, you are saying that you're basically building a technology company or technology arm, a part of your brokerage or asset-based company, whichever it may be. And ultimately, I think like one of I don't know if distraction is the right word, but it just becomes this large thing that you have to then put so much time and energy into and effort into. And most of it's going to be from your C-suite, your upper leaders. And I'm not like trying to make a case to why they should like buy outside all the time, but then the question becomes, obviously the tech's very important, but if that time was spent with customers, with prospects, whatever it may be, like what the trade-off there, right? You obviously have to like play that into factor, because I can only imagine, like I know it with the CRM, but I can only imagine with the TMS, just all the little things that actually pop up on a day in and day out basis, man. And I would imagine that list just gets crazy freaking
Mm-hmm.
long and a beast to manage. And I think that's the reason why two brokerages that come to mind for me right now have been working to go away from that.
Mm-hmm. Well, the big piece that I think you understand this, because now you run a tech company, right? But a lot of people don't understand is like you don't just build tech and then it's done. Like you have to
No,
maintain it,
correct.
right? And
Integrations.
so,
Talk about that. Maintaining and
right?
supporting integrations, right?
Yeah. Like, oh, it broke. Well, we fired the rest of our developers, and so we got to go find someone on a contract basis to fix this, and it's going to be down for 6 weeks. Whereas, like, no, we maintain a team. Like, people don't realize that that's what it takes.
Yeah.
The amount of engineers that we have on staff for new stuff, for current stuff, for old stuff. I mean, it's how it is, man. You've got a whole team of people doing all these things, and it's the stuff that's already built is still taking time to maintain and manage and tweak and do all the things, right? It doesn't
Oh,
stop.
yeah. Like we just went through a period where we had to update some older libraries, and this is a little
Yeah.
specific. And all of a sudden it's like kicking people out of the system. We're like, well, damn,
Yeah.
and it's for the most random actions in the system, but that's just the kind of stuff that you can't predict. But it's like, yeah, stuff updates over time when you use all these different libraries or components and all this kind of stuff. And then somebody's got to update those. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's just so random. There's one day where certain things just don't work, or for one rep, you'll have it to where it's just like one sales rep for whatever reason, that little thing is just not working for them. They're just getting
Yeah.
tripped up there. So yeah, I guess you don't really know it until you experience it and go through it. But
Mm-hmm.
I know that build versus buy is a very common conversation at a lot of the bigger conferences and all that stuff. And I find it kind of just an interesting conversation, because I can understand points from both sides for sure. But I do think that it can be underestimated in terms of the lift and time and energy and effort required that it does take to build. It's a
Yeah.
beast.
It should be both, though, right? Like, just back to my point, like, people don't realize it can be both.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be one or the other, right? But
Build
really
and or
understanding what
buy.
that looks like.
That'll be
Yeah.
the next
So,
conference trade show.
there you go. There you go.
There we go. Um, let's talk some sales, man. I wanted to also
Sure.
like just chat sales stuff with you. I feel like you're a fellow sales nerd from just, all of our conversations and all of your posts and whatnot. What do you enjoy about sales?
Oh God, the pain, right? I know that sounds funny, but if you're a sales guy that has been selling for a while, you know what I mean. In a sick way, you kind of learn to love like the struggle and the pain, right? Um, because that's part of what makes the win so great, right? And so just kind of that like scrappy nature of like, I'm gonna compete, I'm gonna fight. This guy's gonna hang up on me. I'm gonna call this dude 9 times, and not in a pestering way, but because he wanted me to call him, and I'm gonna eventually get a hold of him. And that persistence and kind of that that muscle. I know I'm like doing something physically that I can't really put in words, but you know what I
Yeah.
mean. Sometimes you got to like flex that and get in there.
Yep.
But I think more than anything, for me, it's realizing that like I can provide a certain value to people as a representative of an organization that I'm hoping would be an experience for them that they're not going to get elsewhere, right? So like actually making the experience enjoyable. And let's call it what it is. Sales guys have a really bad reputation.
Yeah.
And you know
True.
what? There's a lot of really shitty sales guys out there. It's a fact, right?
True.
There's a low barrier to entry, which is, I think, a part of the reason why you have so many bad sales guys. But every time I go into a conversation, I know that I'm up against that preconceived notion that like, oh, here comes a freaking dirty sales guy who's going to try to do X, Y, and Z to me, right?
Yeah.
I do enjoy changing people's perception around that, at least with me, right? Like I want you to like, yes, I'm a sales guy. And I know in so many ways, like it comes out when I don't want it to come out. My wife tells me all the time, like, dude, stop selling or whatever. But I want you to not look at me like a used car salesman is like the example that a lot of people would use.
Mm-hmm.
I really do enjoy trying to be a breath of fresh air for my prospects when they're dealing with salespeople. I know that's like kind of like really like niche, unique take on that, but I really, not that like I'm the counter sales guy, but I think you know what I'm trying to say, right?
For sure. If you were to go back to door sales, Mike, talk to him and give him a piece of advice that he probably needed at that time, what would you give him now? Not that you've put in thousands of reps and
I mean, I think it's, you know, I'm of the opinion that there's no new sales advice. I think all this good sales advice is already out there. I do think there's different techniques and technologies and all that changes. Don't get me wrong. But it really just like, dude, keep going. It gets better. Because that's the hardest part to understand in your early years, right? Because you see all these other people around you succeeding. You hear these people that sound so smooth on phone calls or at doors. You see people closing multiple deals and you're like, I can't even get a freaking meeting. Like, what the hell am I doing wrong? I'm following the playbook, right? They gave me this script and I'm reading it off, right? But it doesn't work. But it would just be to keep going. It gets better. Sales is one of those things I think everybody can figure it out if they're willing to be a student of the game and to keep at it and to work and improve. And it would be also like, you know, hey, don't worry, you're on the right path. It may not seem like it right now, but this is all going to work out for you. Because even like my wife at the time, she's like, are you sure? Like, are you sure you want to go into sales? Like, well, yeah, you can make good money, but like, what if you don't sell? I'm like, yeah, if you don't sell, you don't make money. She's like, doesn't that scare you? I'm like, yeah, that's part of it. That's like part of the allure, right?
Yeah,
and
risk
so,
reward.
And yeah, as you know, when you're starting out, you're not making good money because you're not selling anything because you don't know what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And so it would be just to keep the faith. But like, I mean, I feel like I did that. I think part of it would also be like, don't take yourself so seriously. I've gotten a lot better at that over the years. I'm like that inherently, just in my day-to-day life. But I think when I used to go to work, I would like kind of put on this like work mic kind of face. I've found as I get further on in my career, that's like not really that effective, at least for like building real relationships and personal interactions. Like the guy you met at the conference in Orlando, that was not work mic because work mic doesn't exist anymore. You know what I mean? Like this is just who I am. And I think that's important to like, but when you're younger in your career and you have all these like senior members of the company, you think that they're all like buttoned up in a certain way, but it's all a facade.
Agreed.
And you end up starting to see through it. And so that would be a big thing. Like, hey, don't take yourself too seriously, man. Keep working hard. Be yourself. Figure it out. It's going to work out.
That's good.
That was a long-tailed answer, dude.
No, I mean, yeah, I think on the keep going piece, man, and like even just the no new sales advice, I think sales is just one of those things that you do learn because I always just use like the phrase that you get punched. And when you get punched, you eventually learn how to dodge the punches or you just absorb the punches better. It's like, it's a little bit of both. And I've fallen into this in my past before. And I think a lot of people do that I speak with when we do talk sales is it's so easy to get caught up reading all the content and, you know, trying to go through all this training and stuff, but you really learn best by actually just doing it because you actually feel the punch, right? Versus like watching Tyson absorb the punch. It's so much different versus you actually getting the punch thrown at you and you feeling it.
Oh yeah.
And then eventually you figure out how to move better, I think, the next time. And I think like when you talk about when you're, you know, brand new into a company and you're watching somebody that's just crushing it and hitting goals, making so much money, they've just done it hundreds, thousands of times. And that's just, you know, it's the repetitions and stuff. And I think it just gets so underestimated where to me, I get super optimistic with it because I just feel like if you just do have the work ethic and the effort, if you put in the effort piece, man, you can make so much things happen in sales and then you can make the money and it is worth that risk, right? Of like, is it even worth doing? 1,000%.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, for sure. I love the repetition piece, and I use this example, which I'm sure you'll relate to because I know you like to golf. It's like no one gets good by watching a video on how to swing a golf club.
No,
You don't. You have to go shank so many balls
tons.
and lose whole sleeves of Pro V1s before you realize you don't need to spend that much money on golf balls, right?
Yeah,
And you just need to do the thing, which is buy a bucket of balls, get out on the course and swing the freaking club, right? It's the only way, ultimately, like you said, to take the punch, right?
it's true. Tiger Woods says it. He says, somebody was asking him for advice on golf, and he's like, "Stop watching YouTube videos. Go hit balls." It's simple as that.
Right? Go
Like
make calls, right?
go make calls. Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's one
Yeah,
of like jokingly what I say to Anthony and our other sales guys. Like we're catching up, doing whatever, and like end of every single sales call or every single like check-in call one-on-one I'm having with him, I'm like, all right, dude, you know the deal. Go find another one, right? And it's like somewhat joking, but it's also like just basic advice. Like, okay, like we need to go find another one. Like this is what we need to do. We need to go get
yeah,
in the reps. So like make your calls, do your emails, schedule your meetings, things like cool, great, awesome, good job on that one. Go find another one, right? And it's
dude, I
kind of
love
like
that.
the old sales manager thing, but like it's in a joking way, but it's true. It's like, hey, you already know, man. Go find another one,
Yep.
right? And it just kind of keeps you on your toes. But it's easier for me to deliver to him because we've built a relationship. Right? You can't do that to a new hire that might not understand your humor yet, right?
Well, I mean, even that. I mean, that's just honestly the right. I think it's just the right culture to build from a sales standpoint, because if you're one of those sales reps that gets really excited about one opportunity and you're just hanging on and leading and praying for that one opportunity, you're not going to make it, because you have to stack up the opportunities, because like close rates are real. People ghost you. You're not going to win certain things because certain things out of your control, or maybe you actually just didn't do good enough in the sales process and education and advising and all that stuff. That's just real. Um, so yeah, I think giving yourself enough chances and everything is crucial to be able to do that. What for you guys, I guess, just like normal sales cycle length, because I think that this is something that also gets overplayed a lot, is so many people want it now. But I'm assuming the sales cycle length for you is a matter of months, sometimes over a year. What's that range look like for you on the TMS side?
Average somewhere between 3 to 6 months, and that's like active sales cycle, right? First touch point could be years ago, right? You may have looked at us years ago, gone with another TMS for a year or two and come back, right? So like depending on what you consider the sales cycle when you start it. But yeah, I'll have accounts that I called on 4 years ago. Hey, now's not the time. We're not big enough yet. We're growing and whatever. And I'll end up getting them 4 years later, right? And so a lot of it is, again, depending on what you consider like an active sales cycle. Like most things, it takes multiple touch points before someone's actually ready. And then when they're ready, things tend to go pretty fast. But with the bigger organizations, and you know this, bigger orgs, it's a minimum of 9 months, sometimes upwards of like 18 months that they're going through these processes and considering things, because it's just such a big transformation and there's so many stakeholders. But I would say on average, we're probably looking at, let's say from like initial like real discovery call to like close, on average, we're probably looking at 60 to 120 days.
Do you have any specific rule for follow-ups? And obviously that takes time, right? So it requires a lot of follow-ups. What's kind of your thought process on how you try to work your follow-ups?
So I have a rule that I tend to live by, and I like to train the rest of our guys on here. And it's really simple: is if a next step or next meeting does not exist, you don't have a plan for follow-up. Meaning at the end of every single call, I'm going to make sure that I put something on calendar and agree to it with you if you're my prospect. Like, hey, Josh, let's put something on calendar for next Thursday or whenever works for you. Even if we don't actually have the follow-up, it at least pops up on your calendar. You're forced to think about it. You're forced to either ghost me and know you ghosted me, send me an email and cancel it, or come to the meeting. Either way, it's going to put that in your head. And then, of course, I have processes after that. But that's like the number one. And I'd give that advice to anybody in any sale. If you have an active opportunity and there is not a next call scheduled, you don't actually have a follow-up plan. Because then you're what? What are you doing? I hope he gets back to me.
Mm-hmm.
I hope she answers my email. And we all know how that works, right? And even setting the meeting isn't foolproof, right? But at least it's like, hey, we have a committed time on calendar. That's kind of my go-to.
It's great stuff. What's your take on cold calls? You a believer? I know the answer.
I am 100% a believer. Absolutely.
Why?
Because it's worked. Because the proof is in the pudding. I know it works, right? It's kind of interesting though, because like as I've furthered in my career and kind of built out my network and transitioned to like I don't cold call as much as I used to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I'm able to kind of utilize more like social selling type of techniques to get referrals and you know inbounds and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And that's become a bigger part of how we drive top of funnel activity for sure. And I've definitely put some effort towards it. At the end of the day, I mean, picking up the phone and calling someone is the easiest way to cut through the noise.
Mm-hmm.
And look, do most people not answer their phone? Of course. I still know I called you. When I meet people at conferences and I meet, you know, I'm like, I hear their name or I see their badge. Hey, I cold called you.
Called
and
that
I know
guy.
that.
Yeah.
And I can say it with confidence. And most of them are like, damn, dude, was I mean? And I'm like, no, don't worry about it. You didn't answer. But at least it gives you that like fortification of your position and your attitude that like, no, I'm out here doing the work. And I think that's part of it is like knowing I'm not scared to pick up the phone. I will call whoever the hell you want me to call, and I will call, and I'll get a no. I don't care if it's a no, but you're going to give me an answer, right? And until then, you're on my list, right? And not in like an aggressive way, but it's cold calling will never die, man. No, definitely not. I know you feel the same way.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, my big exposure to it came from freight brokerage. From being in a freight brokerage, because I really hadn't cold called before that. You know, when I was at Tesla, it was a lot very inbound lead driven.
Sure.
And then, you know, I wouldn't say it was like cold, but you just have people walk into the showroom, and then at that point, like it's a cold lead, but they're in your room, so it's a little bit different.
Sure.
But I think the cool thing from when I got into brokerage, and I mean, week one, I actually came in as a manager, and I had to build a team of 12 from scratch, but I had a goal month one. So I'm like, all right, cool. Well, I'm the only person that can put revenue up on the board. So guess who's got to make the dials? It's this guy. But also for me to coach the AEs more effectively that I had hired was going to be pretty important. And I mean, man, it was just like, it was really tough the first week. There were so many things that, I mean, I just remember how bad the calls were, but the coolest part for me was that I could call them 2 or 3 weeks later and they just had no idea who I was. And
Sure.
by day 4, you're just so much better, because if you've done 60, 70, 80 calls in a day, and then after a week, next week, you feel like a brand new human going into the office to make the dials. So it was, for me, that was kind of cool. But the thing that I thought was the coolest part about it in general, and I know people don't really think cold calls are cool, is that you literally can just like create growth.
Dude, it's the coolest thing.
And that to me is the coolest thing, man. Like, you see the guys at the conferences, you know, you've cold called them or talked to them or whatever. But for example, just in bootstrapping Sales Dash, it's not like I wouldn't have been able to bootstrap without it 100%. And so that's the best part, is it's just one form of sales and marketing to me, but it can be so effective because, and I prefer it so much more of a cold email, because for the depths of a TMS or for the depths of a CRM, it's just too tough in an email.
Yeah.
I
want to pull a thread on what you said. Yeah, I want to pull a thread though, because I don't think people give the credit, like how freaking incredible and cool it is that like you can like do some research, like find a dude who's never talked to you before, interrupt his day with a phone call. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe he's eating, he's in a meeting, he's doing whatever. Somehow convert that into like, hey, give me 15 minutes of your time or whatever, you know, you're selling, whether you're selling a discovery call or a demo or whatever. And then like eventually like this dude who never knew me, I found him on the internet. I called his cell phone or his office line. He answered, didn't think I was enough of a jackass to keep listening to me. And like now he signed a contract and he's paying money to the company I work for.
Wow.
It's the weirdest thing.
It's the coolest
thing. And being able to do that is like, dude, I did that. Like, that's really, really dope.
It's so awesome. I think that is one of the coolest things.
Yeah, dude.
Because at the end of the day, that's just called straight order making, you know?
Yeah.
And to me, that's just one of the more powerful things. and I know people hate on cold calls a lot, but at the end of the day, the top brokerages that are out there, man, they are there simply because they cold called very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
Just the
Absolutely.
truth. It's not really anything else outside of that. They primarily have done that just at a very high level and just super consistently, and honestly pretty cutthroat. Not saying that
Yes.
I'm an advocate for that, but if you really understood
Yeah.
the rules that they do, and most people do because so many people came from them, it's pretty cutthroat in terms of the follow-up cadence and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about your social content. Obviously I know that you use that a little bit too to, I love to use it personally because I think it's just like a follow-up that you don't have to directly make to somebody. They just kind of see your face and your name and your company name. Again, it's just like a random touch point. But how do you try to leverage your social content to sort of help you on the sales marketing side?
Yeah. So started a few years ago, where it became more intentional, that I was going to try to utilize that channel, and it was very new to me. Again, I learned how to sell by literally knocking doors. This is what I know. Give me a list, I'm going to pound through it, and that's all I know is like brute force is how I used to sell and bring top of funnel, right? So I wasn't necessarily a believer at first because these things are also long tailed and
Yeah.
it takes a while for them to work. But a lot of it just comes down to consistency. I think I had to figure out, what do I want to post about, and in a blend of like, if someone's always posting about, in my opinion, like always posting about their product, like on their personal page, like that could get overwhelming
Yeah.
for the people that are seeing it. But also, if I'm like, I post about sales sometimes. If I'm always posting about sales, then you're like, okay, Mike posts about sales, but like, what does he actually sell? Right. And then like, so kind of balancing both of those.
Yeah.
And so for a while, I would do like a twice a week. I'm going to do one post about sales and one post about like freight tech. Right. That was
Yeah.
kind of like my rule that I just kind of went with. And so then people started to, I think, see that and know me for those two things. And then what happens is, to your point, you have a touch point that you didn't have to direct at anybody. You can actually spray it out in a wider net. When people are ready, then all of a sudden they come inbound, which it seems like an inbound lead. We just had one recently that Anthony's been working on. I got on a call with him. He's like, oh, by the way, I watch yours and Cameron's show on Friday mornings on LinkedIn Live, and I see all the content you post. This is awesome. Right? That's the only reason they knew about us. It
Yeah.
wasn't because of a cold call. It wasn't. And so like on the surface, it looks like, oh, this is an inbound lead from the website. But like it wasn't. It was because of the content that me and Cameron and our company page is doing, right?
Yeah.
And so seeing those things work, or even at conferences, I know you experience this at conferences, people are like, oh, dude, that's Josh from LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
And it's weird
It is.
for me. I'm like, I don't want to be Mike from LinkedIn. I'm not Mike from LinkedIn, right? But like, you know what? So be it, right? And so
Yeah.
I think the big thing is just consistency. But also going back to something I said before, it's like, I don't need to be work Mike. Now, of course, I'm not going to be like the same as I might like post on like my personal social media that I have on like Instagram or something like that, right? But it's like people don't connect with like the professional version of you. They connect with like the guy behind the facade, right? And so being able to kind of show that personality as much as you can on LinkedIn. And I know people are like, well, it's not a personal side and it's professional side. And that's a whole different tangent. But I think it's consistency with messaging, and just like you said before, it's just doing the reps and showing up. I mean, it's really, most of these things are not complicated in the sense like it's a simple formula, but it's not easy to execute and stay consistent, right?
That's the consistency is the biggest thing, because the algorithm hits you if you're not consistent, and
yeah,
people will forget about you if you're not consistent. And sometimes
100%.
it's crazy, man, but that's really all you need is just like staying in front of somebody a few times from the podcast and whatnot. And you don't really know if that ROI is going to be there from you and Cam sitting down for, an hour and a half every single time, or however long it may be. But I mean, at the end of the day, if somebody's shopping, and I think one of the cooler parts about that piece in particular is they get to know you without ever talking to you first. Right.
Absolutely.
So it's almost like a little bit of a self-qualifying, self-discovery piece for your prospects and customers. And I've always found that pretty cool from the content. It's just like you get a bunch of randos that will say some stuff of like, oh, I've seen your stuff, and they're like, great, it's cool though. It's sales at scale. It's as simple as that.
Sales at scale is a great way to say it, for sure.
Cool, man. Wrapping up, what are you most optimistic about right now about 3PL Systems and what you guys are doing on the TMS side?
Yeah. So I think we're a really interesting company in the space because of one thing, and there's many, but if I were to pick one thing, um, we're the largest privately held TMS provider in the space, and I can say that with confidence. There is nothing wrong with institutional money. There's nothing wrong with private equity or venture capital. However, there's a certain culture and experience that customers have when they're dealing with those types of vendors that I think is much different than what we provide, right? I'm not saying either is right or wrong, but for people that want that different experience, that's the thing that I'm most excited about, because we really double down on that. Everybody says like we listen to our customers, but if you talk to our customers, they will tell you like, no, it's different with those guys over there at 3PL Systems. And really, continuing that culturally, because it's not just externally to our prospects and our clients, it's also internally to our team. We have a really good like kind of open door policy, and everybody's safe, you can speak up, that kind of thing. But building a company side by side with Cameron in that way, it just feels, and I'm not like a big feels guy, but it feels a lot different, and it feels really good to be building a company that way instead of like this hyper growth crazy, throw money at a ton of marketing. And again, there's a time and a place for it. I'm not saying either is right or wrong. It just feels better to us, right?
Yeah, you get to move a little bit differently, and there's a difference, I think, in behaviors that are pushed down in it. That
there's downstream effects.
There are
sure.
Of course, that's what. Yeah, that's the way. Yeah, that's the perfect way to say that. Mike, how can anybody that's listening, if they're interested in 3PL Systems, wanted to chat with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you guys?
Yeah, go to our website, 3plsystems.com. We just revamped it. Our creative director did a really good job with it. Shout out Kevin. There's demo request forms and contact forms. You can email sales@3plsystems.com. That'll go to a shared sales inbox, or find me on LinkedIn. You can look up my name, Michael Sternberg, and I'm on there every day at some point. Some days more than others, but yeah, man, we're out here. We're available. You can get a hold of us. Right?
Love it, man. Well, no, always appreciate you and just how you carry yourself, and being a friend and all that stuff, man. So I'm glad we got a chance to actually connect on here. I appreciate you taking the time out, because I know you've got plenty of other stuff going on, but thanks for sharing with the audience, and as always, good to see you, man.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Mike.